To facilitate operational and other decisions, of course, we need information. And the primary attribute that we're most concerned with is whether or not that information is relevant. Now, what is relevant information? Well, loosely defined, relevant information basically has the potential to make a difference in a decision. That sounds like a lot, and that is true. There's a lot of relevant information in many situations. But that begs the question, is really anything irrelevant? Well, let's take a look at an example. An example would be revenues or costs that do not differ across alternatives. So, to use a silly example, imagine I am choosing to go left or right at a fork in the road. And I look down to the path to the left, and there's a pile of snakes there. Well, that's going to be a cost that I'm going to incur or face if I go down to the path to the left. I look down to the right, and I see a path full of snakes there as well. Also a cost associated with turning right. Well, that information is actually irrelevant because regardless of whether or not I turn left or right, I'm incurring the same cost and having to face that obstacle. The same thing would be about benefits. If the benefits, or there are benefits between the two paths that are exactly the same, then those are not really relevant to the decision itself. Relevant information would be the stuff that differs between the two alternatives. That has the potential to make a difference in a decision. To consider this concept more, let's turn to a specific example. In particular, let's talk about the concept of a sunk cost. Defined, sunk costs are costs that have been incurred or committed to and cannot be avoided. Essentially what that means is that those costs are incurring no matter what I decide, and so they are irrelevant. Examples would include costs that have been incurred in the past, things that are behind me, which means that I can't change them going forward, and those will have been incurred regardless of whether I turn left or turn right. Another example would be costs that might happen in the future, but they're contracted, meaning I can't get out of them, I can't avoid them. So regardless of what my decision is, I'm going to incur those costs. Now, it can be very difficult to consider sunk costs as irrelevant. Have you ever been in a situation where you said, well, I've spent enough time on this already, I might as well keep going? Well, that would be an example of a sunk cost fallacy, meaning that you're treating that past time that you spent as an indicator of what your decision would be going forward. Well, regardless of whether or not you continue going forward or not, you've spent the time. So that time is a sunk cost, should be irrelevant, but oftentimes it's very difficult to ignore. We'll see in the future examples just how difficult it is for managers and employees to consider sunk costs as irrelevant.